While it's preparing to live stream. Okay, so we should be live on Facebook, and I'm just going to stall for a second as I wait to make sure that I can see us. Oh, there we are. Okay, that is good. And are we on the main page as well, or just in that other page that I can see? Sorry, everyone, if you're tuning in and following us. There we go. And oh, captions are coming up. So I better enunciate, use good diction, because apparently that's turned on. But welcome everyone. I'm for another one of our Facebook Live series. This is the first one I've done where there's a little bit of light out. So spring is on the way, not sitting alone in the dark anymore. And that's great. And I hope folks got a chance to get outside and enjoy the sunshine today. It was so good for you. So good to just get some fresh air and get some of that sunlight. But I'm here tonight with Caitlin Willier, who is the habitat biologist at the Department of Environment. And a couple of months ago, I'm not sure when, Caitlin, you did a great presentation about some of the work and some of the research you're looking at with meadow plants. And we saw this, and Olivia and I said, we really that would be really cool. You should share that with other people. So I was so glad that you were able to take time of your Wednesday night to join us and share this information with the folks out there in cyberspace who are tuning in right now. So a few housekeeping items just before we begin, that if for some weird cybernetic reason that this live stream gets cut off and we can't speak anymore, you need to get out of that video and then go to our main wildlife viewing page and wait, and we will send a new stream, but we can't connect to the old stream again. So just stay on our homepage and we will be able to sign in there again, and you'll see us and we'll pick up where we left off. There is a small delay in what we're saying and what you're receiving. So when we might move on past a topic and then your question comes up. So I'll be writing down questions and then making sure we keep track and then finding a good time to interrupt Caitlin and get them answered. Even if it's at the end of the presentation, we can do that. So feel free to throw those into the comment boxes on the Facebook page. And we have one more of these live stream events scheduled for March 16th. So that's really exciting. And it's really awesome that we've been able to reach out to folks across the territory and across the country, really wherever you are, and normally wouldn't be able to speak to everyone that way. So it's a small silver lining that we have in this difficult time. But hopefully this spring, if we stay good and everyone is staying healthy, then we'll be back to in-person events. So that'll be exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing people more than just a few wonderful likes. Thank you for the folks who are liking this video, letting us know that you're out there and you're watching. That's great. So I won't stall anymore. I think we've given folks enough Yukon time to sign in. And I'd like Caitlin to take it away and tell us a bit more about your plants and the things you got out there.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. As Carrie mentioned, I've given this presentation before to some work colleagues, people of Yukon Environment. So if you're tuning in and you've seen the last one, you might want to turn off the live stream now.
No, stay.
So
tell your friends. So interesting.
Yes. Stay tuned. I'm gonna throw up the presentation right now, and this is always the part where people show their tech savviness, I suppose. All right.
2 years of Zoom practice. Can you do it?
Yeah, I know. I always end up showing everybody
your latest YouTube
computer. I don't want them to see.
Yeah. Oh, this is what I'm watching on YouTube.
Okay.
All right.
There you go.
So we can still see it. It's not, there we go. Now.
A little delay.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. So this presentation's name changes every single time I give a presentation. So today, this presentation will be called Meadow Plants Mapping Project for the Yukon South Beringia. So to preface this whole thing, I'm going to show you some information about Beringia and meadow plants. And then there's going to be a lot of information about the project that I'm running with YG and how we do mapping for this particular project, which is a bit different than a lot of other mapping projects that Yukon Environment runs. So to start off, who am I? So my name is Caitlin Willier, and there's a little red circle with the finger guns there. The other people I should shout out to everybody is that these people are the Y2C2 crew, and they're out there learning about wetlands, and we're classifying wetlands. So great bunch of people. I'm originally from Foss, Alberta, so northern Alberta, and throughout my biology career, I've done rare plants and wetland work. I've been a habitat biologist. Actually, I guess I've been a habitat biologist for 2.5 years now, but working at YG. And I just want a big shout out to say that I live and work on the traditional territories of the Kwanlin First Nation and the Tonquitchin Council. And I'm really happy to be here today to share this presentation with everyone. So just to get started, again, a little preface for this whole thing is that I'm not an expert on Beringia, but I'm going to do my best to explain it quickly. So I have a map here of Beringia, which is the area that has the Bering Land Bridge, and it's an unglaciated portion connecting Russia and Western Alaska, Yukon. And this area, the term for Beringia was coined by Hulton. And I brought the book just because it's huge, but a botanist and a huge flora that you can check out. Very cool, very extensive. And yeah, so this area is quite unique. First of all, being unglaciated, and also the waxing and waning of glaciers contributed to this area being open for movement, in particular for this context, for plant distribution. So we end up with really cool conditions for dispersal and diversification of plants. So just to really feed into that a little bit more, the fact is that we have plants that are on one side of Beringia, so on the North American side, and then we have plants on the Asian side, and then some plants that span both sides. And there's some really cool studies out there. This one in particular that put up the Eckert Bond et al. Looked at these contrasting patterns and like what drives diversity on either side of Beringia. So in our area in particular, you can see this huge map that I put up here of Yukon. We see a lot of ours having to do with this ice-free period. So during the Pleistocene epoch, there were areas in the Yukon where it wasn't glaciated. And what that means is that it was a refugia from the glaciers. They were still impacted by the glaciers and these extreme weather events, but not as much as some areas. And plants were actually able to survive being in these ice-free places. Highly recommend that you get a chance to go out to the Beringian Interpretive Center. Very cool, and you can learn tons about Beringia. And I won't touch on it too much more, other than to say that we have an initiative in the Yukon called the Yukon South Beringia, and that is a portion of that ice-free glacial area that I showed in the last map, the southern portion of it. And that area has been honed in as a priority place, which means that there's a concentration of species at risk and rare species to North America. Some that are only found in Alaska and Yukon are found in this area. And we've decided to designate this area to really focus in on species at risk management. So like I said, some of the species that we'll be looking at today are found only here, nowhere else in the world. And that's very, very cool, especially for the North. The North is like not known to have a huge amount of endemism, but in this particular place, yeah, you can find stuff nowhere else. So when we talk about Beringia, everybody thinks about mammoths, and mammoths are pretty cool, but I want us to shift our focus away from mammoths today and maybe take a look at some of the smaller creatures and creatures that we can still find here. Yeah. So I think Yukon draba is pretty cool as well. So try to keep an open mind. We won't be talking too much more about mammoths. All right, so meadows, aka steppes. So you might hear me saying those two things interchangeably. Normally I refer to them as meadows because in the Yukon, a lot of these meadows are dominated by forbs, which are small leafy plants, as opposed to what we would normally attribute with steppe, which would be graminoids, which are grass-like things or sedges. So these steps, you can see them in the image here, and they're these big open bluff systems. They're not always on rivers, but a lot of them are in the Yukon. And this is the Yukon River in this picture. And these open areas are treeless or very few trees on them and don't have a huge amount of shrubs. So these areas have less competition, more open, super hot and dry, and dominated by forbs, grasses, and lichens. So, oh, here's Bruce. He's looking at plants. He is sitting in a Beringian meadow system. And these have these species that you can see all around Bruce. A lot of these plants are strongly associated with ruminant steppe. And I'm going to list a bunch of them here. So Artemisia laciniata, a really interesting sage. Another Artemisia woodsii. Draba yukonensis, Nistotis McClinii, sorry, I'm not very good at my Latin names pronouncing them, Commandrin umbellata, Aragonum flavum, Krechnikovia lanata, Selene williamsii, Coaleria asiatica. Oh, I'll say one more thing about some of these. So some of these species are endemic to the Yukon, so found nowhere else. Some of them are endemic to the Yukon and Alaska, so Amphiberingian. And some of these species have huge disjunct populations, meaning that they're found in the Yukon, and then they have a big gap in space where they're not found anywhere in between. And then all of a sudden you'll find them somewhere like southern Alberta or Utah in these grasslands there, which is pretty cool. Makes you wonder. There's so many questions that we could be asking ourselves about these species. All right, so back to the meadows themselves as an ecosystem. The distribution of steppe is strongly influenced by microclimate, which means that if you were to look at climate's kind of a bigger area. So when we think of like the weather and it's being told to us about the temperature that's at the airport, and you can be like, okay, well, that temperature kind of relates to all of Whitehorse. But then you can think about it when people talk about, oh, well, if you go up to Copper Ridge, it's a little bit colder up there. If you go down to Riverdale, it might be a bit warmer. And then as we start to hone in on those smaller temperature differences that are associated with like elevation or with going into someone's house where it's warmer, that's when we start talking about microclimates. So if you looked at this whole area in this image and we're talking about the valley that you can see below, there's one temperature that you could consider for the whole site. But then there's a microclimate, right, where Bruce is lounging in the sun, I guess, and Carly is standing there. That little area right there is a little bit warmer and a little bit drier than the other areas around it. And then the other piece that I'll mention really quick about this is competition. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but a lot of these species that dominate these steppe meadows don't compete the same way that other species do. They occupy a niche, a small place, a specific area or time that really they're taking advantage of the fact that they can survive in an area that's a little bit more difficult to survive in. So a place where a shrub can't grow or where an aspen tree can't grow, you'll see something like Krechnikovia growing there.
I should point out that Bruce is not like lounging and not doing any work. He probably identified like 5 new species from that position or something. Yeah.
Yeah, his legs are just tired. He's taking a break.
Because he's been identifying plants for 14 hours already.
So the next question that's on my mind is like, where are these meadows? And there's many reasons that we might want to know where these meadows are, but one of the big things that's important for my job is that we talk about conservation planning and about environmental assessment. So we can't protect these species or we can't manage them if we don't know where they are. And that's the same for these ecosystems. And sure, it's easy enough to say like, well, when I see a meadow, it's there. But what's the distribution of it? Are there a lot of meadows out there? Are there just a few? And then it starts to get down into the nitty gritty as well. Are all meadows equal? So if you see a bluff system, that's like when we're in Whitehorse, we see those bluffs all over the place, right? But are those bluffs different than the ones that are found in Yukon South Beringia? I would think they would be, because when we looked at those maps, Whitehorse was under glaciers and Yukon South Beringia, so around Dawson, those weren't under glaciers. So we'd expect that those remnant species that existed through the ice age might only be found in these Dawson area ones as opposed to the ones near Whitehorse. So we put together a team and we made a project to let's go map these meadows. And this is a pretty extensive team, but we have people from the Canadian Wildlife Service, Sid and Shannon, and we have people from the Toronto Quitching government who came out with us to do field work, Kristen Scott and Curly Knight. And of course, our team from the Yukon government, Brett Pegetz, Bruce Bennett, Jesse Vigilati, and Randy Mulder. So the goals for this project was to, one, identify potential areas with endemism. And when I say SAR, it's species at risk in the Yukon South Beringia, and locate new populations that we don't already know about, and create a map that we can put on a service like GeoYukon. So the first thing I always do whenever I think about mapping something, I'm like, can I see it from space? So I go on Google Earth and then I start circling things, and look at that. My brain can look at this picture and I can find meadows. So if that's the case, I'm gonna do an exercise using satellite imagery. So the way that we do that is, well, as you know, Google Earth images, among other images like Maxar and spot imagery, they're collected with a satellite. So the satellite's circling the Earth and it takes pictures of the Earth. And then that data is ingested or digested like into computers. And then we can go and download that imagery and do stuff with it, which in our case would be modeling. So for the project that we're working on, I'm using Landsat, Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2. So, and I'm collecting that data using Google Earth Engine. So quick thing, Google Earth Engine, you can just go on there, you can download data, you can manipulate data, and you can create mosaics and maps for modeling. And the methods that we used for collecting this data from Google Earth Engine are borrowed and developed from this wetland classification project that was done in Alberta by Delancey et al. So I get my satellite imagery, which ends up with a whole bunch of values and numbers that are attributed with different optical sensors from satellites. And to train that data, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. So I can go onto something like Google Earth and I can circle a bunch of areas and I can make that into training data. Or what we're going to do with this project, what we did with this project was that we took locations of where we knew there were plants already, and we trained the models using locations of those plants. And this is just a really rough overview of where those locations were. The black dots are zeros, so that's where we didn't find anything. So going back to where I said, okay, there's meadows out there, and then you can start throwing little dots on there, and that's where we know there is an endemic plant. So those plants have really strong species landscape vegetation associations, and we can use those to train the model. So what that looks like. So like I said, we have these, we have this satellite imagery, and each of those images has different bands that are associated usually with colors or some sort of reflectance. So how shiny is the landscape? How wet is the surface? That's how we can get that from synthetic aperture radar. And then for every location where you found a plant, there will be a very specific number associated with that. So how yellow is the landscape? How blue is the landscape? How wet is it? And how shiny is it? And then for all those different values, we train a model. And for the model that we used, we did a boosted regression. And then we create a predictive map. So once you have all the little points, then you can say, okay, based on where we found them, what does everything else look like? Show me all the other areas that look just like that location where we found those plants. And then you end up with a model like this. So for the golden weed, the Nistotis McLennii, you can see the yellow in here. And those are areas there's a high probability or a high suitability for that species to be there. So it looks, all these spots look very similar to places where we found them. And you can already see like, it's probably not completely covered by them, but it also means that it's a a niche space. Like this is a spot that potentially Nestotis could grow because it looks very similar to where it was growing before. So this is a lot to take in, but the idea is that we created these probabilities. So what's the likelihood of finding a species there? And then I turned them into binary, so 1 or 0, based on a threshold. So I said, it has to be 75% or more. That's my cutoff. You got to get 75% or more, and then that'll turn into a 1, and I'll say that's likely. And then I took all the different species, because I made individual models for all the species, and then added them together to make a richness raster. So it kind of looks like this, but you have to zoom in a bit.
Sorry, Caitlin, when you say you made it for all the species, you mean all the rare Beringian species?
So about 13, and I didn't go into too much detail, and I should have a little bit more on that, because some species we just don't have enough occurrences to model them.
Okay.
So our cutoff was about 10 occurrences or more to use them.
Okay, so you have a list of those 13 that you showed us earlier on the slide. Those are like Beringian keystone species, and then those are the ones you're mapping here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so the species, we had focal species, sorry, and then we stacked those, and we end up with a map like this, which shows the number of times a location got selected for being suitable for that species. A little bit of zoom. This one's really choppy looking, but because I made it into a polygon, but yeah, you end up with this yellow, which is super high likelihood for having endemic species there. So there was probably like 4 or 5 species that predicted on that one location. So now what? So we made this initial rough map, and what are we going to do next? So this was we finished that map last year around this time. And then in May of 2021, so last May, we went out to actually look for some of these species and to test the maps. So we decided we would describe communities and do visual population estimates. We'd collect DNA from some of the species that we found, and we would look for zeros. And what I mean by that is that we're looking for spots where the map was wrong. We found a lot of those. All right, and this will require some helicoptering. So just some things to think about while we're talking about this, but landscape scale is super important. It's a huge area. And it's complex. There's rivers, different types of bluff systems, and there's the microsites and topographic features while we're heading around. So we chose a couple focal areas to go to, and as some things to think about before we jump in the helicopter. So we created a probability map, and we threw a fishnet over it, which is all these little hexagons. And then we selected which hexagons to go to by doing a weighted draw for each location. So we chose the ones that were most likely to find something, but also if it's a little bit weird, we should go check it out as well. And then we finally got to jump in the helicopter. And these are just a picture of all our tracks for all the places we went to. And this is northwest of Dawson, so by Eagle, just past the border of Eagle, Alaska. And we worked out of Clinton Creek, which is a super cool area and really, really beautiful. And then we went to the White River confluence. We didn't have as much time in the White River, but we also didn't have as much luck in the White River. So we didn't find as many species, which was super interesting. One of the big things we found with the White River, and I'll bring this up again in a little bit, but a lot of that area has been burnt. And so we got fooled a couple times by burns. So they looked like they were meadows, but they weren't. So just to tell you guys what we found a new Pedistra yukonensis population. We also found a Pedistra mccoonii population, 2 Artemisia lanceolata, laciniata, sorry, Erissimum angustatum, and Selene williamsii. So really awesome. The Erissimum, so that's this picture right here, is one of the most beautiful smelling flowers I've ever smelled in my whole life. So if you ever see one, they're like pretty big, and it smells like honeysuckle. And until last summer, I had never smelt an Erissimum flower. So if you ever get the chance.
Okay, so these are all Latin names.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
they have any English names that we might
So
know
it's
them by?
Dawson Wallflower.
Okay, Dawson Wallflower. Oh, well, it doesn't sound like it's a wallflower at all if it smells so beautiful. Yeah.
I don't know. You know what? And now I gotta smell more wallflowers because I honestly don't go around smelling flowers as much as I should. It's a travesty. So
That's a metaphor for life, right?
yeah,
Stop and smell the
actually.
flowers. I think we all should be smelling more flowers, I think.
So after we did all that field work, we came back to the office and we did another statistical model. And this time it's better, bigger, all of the Yukon. And we'll see how they look. I haven't completely finished stitching them all together yet, but they're very nearly done, and we'll be putting out a report soon so people can look into that. Here's a quick preview, I guess. So this is what it starts to look like when it's all finished, is that you end up with this ranking, which is the richness, which is the number of species that were predicted for each spot. Yeah, that's what it looks like. So you can see that there's kind of these bluffy areas, and the model is able to pick them out, which is way more efficient than going in and asking somebody to trace around them by hand. Of course, there will be errors, and the good thing about having collected data last year is we can also do an accuracy assessment for some of these maps and areas as well. So we can tell you, like, well, I wouldn't trust it this much in this area, but maybe you can trust it a little bit more in this area. All right, so this is just a really quick thing to think about, and this is for all plant sort of thing, plant projects, but you always want to think about how difficult it is to see plants. Are you going to miss some? Are some populations really big? And some communities are clustered, some communities are spread out. So Aragona flavum is a huge plant. Like, that's probably, I should have put it in someone else's, a smaller hand maybe. And then this one, super tiny little guy, that's a finger. That's a finger. Yeah, little drabba there. So just back to this one really quick. So when we're making these models, we don't always know what we don't know. So you don't know what you missed. So that's always something to keep back in mind. But that's for all models, wherever. Even with we use satellite imagery, but there's always little things, like I was saying, that you can't control for, which would be like interspecific competition and some microsite temperature climates that we can't see with the satellite imagery. All right, so the end of this, I think we're going to end up with a map. Well, no, I'm not thinking. We're going to end up with a map at the end of it. We were able to locate some new populations, and we gathered more data. And we're hoping that we can keep doing this into the future. So maybe not right away, but we should be going out looking for more plants and like building these models and making them better. And hopefully that will feed into the kinds of decisions we make on the landscape. Being more informed lets us plan, and planning lets us make better decisions on what we end up doing and what activities we do in some areas and what activities we don't do in some areas. All right, so again, I just want a big thanks to the people who helped on this project. Like, everybody really gave it their all. And a big thank you to White Gold and Ground Truth Explorations who let us stay at their camp for a bit. And yeah, just everybody was super great. So it was a really good project. And if you want to give me a call or an email and talk more about rare plants, I would love that. So jot down my information. I'm always happy to talk about endemic meadows and modeling and that sort of thing.
Just to highlight that, I went on a trip last summer and came back and showed Caitlin a photo of a plant that we couldn't quite identify, and she was so excited about it. So don't feel bad if you've got some questions and you're like, I'd like to chat more about rare plants. She's your lady. Yeah, she'll do that for you. But so if folks have, someone would like to know what the pretty purple flower was on your last slide.
Oh, that one. Oh wait, I have to look now. Is it the glacier? I should double check.
Open your big book. That's a big book.
I know, eh?
And you don't even have it like propping up your monitor like most of us have those big books. Like you're actually using
Yeah,
that
it's
big
not
book.
used for that. I have another one for that one.
Yeah, I have a different university textbook that I prop on my monitor with. While Caitlin's looking that up, I just wanted to speak to the point of reporting rare plants. So if you go to the Yukon Conservation Data Center website at yukon.ca, and you can get a list of these rare plants and descriptions and photos, and take them with you when you go on trips, because as you'll see, a lot of the information we have on species surrounds our roads in our communities, because that's where people are going. So if you do have an opportunity to hike into the backcountry, to get off the beaten path, go down a different river that people haven't gone down that frequently, and could bring these pages with you, you might help contribute to our understanding about where these plants are. And you could even help Caitlin's models by saying, hey, I got a picture, I found one of these plants in one of these meadows, and that would help your models too, and help our understanding of these species. So my big story is that I did that. I hiked the Denisto Trail between Faro and Ross River, and this was before we knew a lot about the Nestotis flower. And we found a whole bunch of populations along that trail that had never been mapped before, and that greatly contributed to our understanding of the range of that flower. So it wasn't just a hiking trip, it was science. I was doing science while I was out there. Yeah, an iNaturalist, someone has pointed that out too.
One of the ones that you found last summer was really, really cool too. It was
the Boykinia.
Yeah, that one was really great. You were like, I found this thing. I was like, oh my God, Boykinia.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is in the guidebook, it said it was only found in Western Yukon, and we were in Eastern Yukon. And that can happen because just no one had reported it from Eastern Yukon. So like, no one knew. There's a suggestion that perhaps that plant at the end of your slide was Alaska phlox.
Yeah, I think it is actually. I'm
a strong suggestion. Someone who might know what they're talking about. He might be in the next room, actually. Someone else wanted to know what the common names were for some of the plants you mapped. And I don't know if you had that, but I mean, fact of the matter is, some of these plants don't have common names. Like, they're so rare that they just don't have an English or common name that people use.
I'm gonna pull that up right now. I have like a key to all the names.
Mm-hmm. But you and Bruce are two peas in a pod. Like, I often have to remind him, like, hey, you're speaking Latin. Like, no one knows what you're saying right now. And plant biologists do this all the time, where they just rhyme off the scientific name, and we're all like, and I'm like, it's a soapberry. You got it.
I'm just Googling it right now. The what is the CDC has all those
rare plant info sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that the Nestotis is Yukon golden weed, I believe. That was one of the yellow flowers that you showed.
Oh yeah. I feel like I had a list.
Is that not true? Did I hear that wrong? Mm-hmm. Well, if Allison, if you head to the CDC webpage at yukon.ca, then you can get the rare plant info sheets, and it'll have the most common name that we know, which sometimes is just, an anglicized version of the scientific name. Caitlin's on a fast search.
Yeah, I'm trying to Yukon CDC plant info sheets.
Yeah.
I don't know if you just want me to like read them. I don't know. I can give some of them, but it's like a test. I should know, and it would be really hard.
No, I think that I've encountered that with habitat biologists, I think, throughout my career, that we're on a nature walk and all they know is the scientific name, which is understandable because there's so many different names for common names for plants in particular. Birds at least are a little bit more consistent. Those birders, man, they take that seriously, and they don't let people go inventing new names for plants. They call them what they are. So while you're looking that up, I'm just waiting for any more questions that folks might have, but you also had that slide with Caitlin's contact information that you can reach out. And if you missed it, then you can always go back at the end of the presentation, because this will be recorded and available both here and on YouTube. later on. And if you still can't find that, then you can reach out to the Wildlife Viewing Program and we'll connect you with Caitlin. And you can ask her all your rare meadow plant questions. But hopefully this summer you're not so busy that you can't take us out on another wetland walk, because that was fabulous when you you were able to show us that information. But okay, so unless there are any further questions, I think I'll leave it at that. Do you have anything to add, Caitlin?
Not really. The plant meadow, that downloaded, if you want me to say some of the,
yeah.
Okay. I was like, oh, the Artemisia something or others.
Artemisia is like a sage thing, right? Yeah, might even have Yukon sage or something. Debbie Donnelly was wondering if there are any rare plants near Whitehorse. Is there a local place where we can see a Beringian meadow?
Well, the Whitehorse technically wouldn't have any Beringian meadows.
Right, because we were glaciated.
But there's rare plants. There's definitely rare plants in town that you can find. So one of the Beringian relics that you can find in town that's kind of fun is Carex sabulosa.
Right, great.
So that's like it's not a meadow species per se. It's more of like a dune species where the grass flows up. But there's some spots near town that you can find it. And there's
that's the Baikal sedge, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we do a Carcross Dunes walk in the summer where we go look at the Baikal sedge, and you can see that in the Carcross Dunes as well as the dunes along the Takini River. I believe you can find it there. I haven't seen it in the sand bluffs here. Is there a place like in Whitehorse proper? Do you know?
Yeah, there's a place in town that you can see it. That's in Riverdale.
Oh, cool. Well, we should totally check that out next summer.
I'll have to. I don't know the exact spot. I haven't seen it in Whitehorse, but I know you can like wander about and yeah, you can find it. I'm trying to think of some other good spots to see. There are meadows, but they just don't have the rare Beringian plants.
Which makes sense because we weren't part of Beringia.
Some of the best spots to go to. So the Elsek Meadow, that's like in Haines Junction, just outside Haines Junction. So that spot has Draba yukonensis, and that one's really fun. There's also another really good spot to go to that's really close to the road is to the Minto Airport. So the airstrip there, sorry, not airport, but the airstrip. There's Nestotis all over there. There's also Draba yukonensis there, which like my boyfriend and I found last year, which is a huge like range shift for like a range increase for it. There's like a few spots that are like along the roads that are really good. And if you see like a meadow that's like natural that's just popped up, it's like probably a safe bet that there's something cool out there. I'm trying to think of some other spots that have good.
It's just good to know for folks to know that like they can look at those dry meadows and know that that's just not, it's not the same as what's going to be in the forest. There's stuff there, and you should sit down with a picnic and have a look around you and just look at the different plants that might be there.
Totally
interesting. Okay, well, I think we're out of questions right now, so we'll wrap it up. But you know how to get a hold of us, everyone, if you'd like. And we'll see you in a couple weeks for one more Facebook Live. All good, Caitlin?
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.